War turning point. Everyone abandons Russia. China turns it back on Moscow. The US takes the lead and Putin's empire is collapsing fast. Trump is relying Central Asia to pull it out on the Kremlin's grip, while China and Kazakhstan make secret moves behind Putin's back. As Russia drowns in its war against Ukraine, its former friends are rewriting the rules without asking Moscow's permission. Why is Asia leaving the Kremlin? What's China's real plan? And can Trump finally destroy Putin's crumbling Russian world? Sanctions, missiles, isolation, Washington strikes back and the Kremlin faces the end of its era. You are watching Ukraine Today. I'm Zorislava Kolesnikova. Stay tuned, it's about to get even hotter. China turns away from Moscow. The US takes the lead. Trump wants to push Beijing to put pressure on Russia, and it looks like China is ready to make a historic move against the Kremlin. US President Donald Trump plans to use his upcoming meeting with Xi Jinping to involve China in political pressure on Moscow to force Russia to accept a ceasefire plan along the front line. Ukrainian Ambassador Volodymyr Handugii says Trump is preparing a deal of the century where China gets economic bonuses and Russia gets political isolation.
Trump will try to involve Beijing in a political, not military process to make Russia recognize a ceasefire plan. In exchange, China may demand concessions in US trade tariffs.
China is playing its own game, and the Kremlin is no longer its main partner. Beijing wants to strengthen its global position, ease trade pressure from Washington, and distance itself from a Russia that has become toxic even for its allies.
For China, all other issues, rare earth metals, the war in Ukraine, are secondary. The main focus is Taiwan and its political future.
Beijing is breaking its fake alliances with Moscow and turning toward the West. China no longer wants to think with the Kremlin. It's betting on global politics, money, and its own interests. Putin is left alone with war, sanctions, and a collapsing empire. Even Beijing isn't playing by the Kremlin's rules anymore. Trump gathers Central Asia, Washington's new geopolitical move. On November 6, the United States will host the C5+1 summit, where President Donald Trump invited the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan to the White House. This could become a turning point. America is expanding its influence in the region, while Russia rapidly loses its former allies. The Uzbek president's office confirmed the invitation, and Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev thanked Trump, calling the initiative timely.
I share the American leaders' goals: protecting peace, security, and traditional values.
U.S. Special Envoy Sergei Gore and Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau arrived in Tashkent, meeting with Uzbek officials and American business representatives already working in the region. According to the U.S. Embassy, the talks focused on trade and investment, energy, green economy projects, and critical mineral extraction. Washington wants to build a new system of cooperation with Central Asia without Moscow.
The US will continue engaging with Central Asian partners to expand trade and strengthen relations. We look forward to deepening cooperation and celebrating 10 years of the C5+1 partnership.
Trump is pushing Central Asia to finally break away from the Kremlin. After losing influence in Armenia, Georgia, and Kazakhstan, Russia now risks losing the entire region. Meanwhile, the US is building a strategic belt around Russia, strengthening security and economic ties with nations that were once Moscow's vassals. The first S5+1 summit took place in 2023 under President Joe Biden, but Trump's new initiative could deliver a final blow to Russia's influence in Central Asia. America is back, and the Kremlin is losing even those it once called its own. Trump strikes the Kremlin, Washington goes on the offensive. Trump hits back at Putin. The meeting in Budapest is cancelled. New sanctions hit Russia's oil giants, and the US gives the green light for long-range strikes inside Russia. Washington is done playing nice. Trump is finally turned against the Kremlin. But what's really behind this sudden shift? Is it the start of a bigger game against Putin, and is the Kremlin ready for what's coming next? All the details coming up.
The cancellation of the meeting in Budapest, the green light for strikes with long-range British and French missiles on Russian territory, and sanctions against the two largest oil companies in the country, the gas station. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin. What is really happening in the White House?
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready to negotiate. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the green light was given from the Oval Office, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee sprang into action as well. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate itself admits that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day across the ocean, it seems they've turned their backs on Putin. But as analysts point out, it's too early to award Trump the hero medal. Donald, as before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as quickly as possible along the current lines. He wants to pin the badge of a great peacemaker on his lapel and shift all subsequent problems onto the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic. That is, Ukraine wants peace. They said, yes, we stop at the line of demarcation. So Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia does not want that. So according to Trump's logic, pressure needs to be put on Russia, which is what happened in the form of these sanctions. At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we're ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift sanctions and offer some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he will be able to reach Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing, let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, failed to take into account the most important thing, the logic of Putin. The dictator doesn't care about the impoverishment of millions of Russians or the stagnation of the economy. He has his own priorities, and he isn't going to change them, neither under the stick nor the carrot.
He lives for war, you understand? The future of the Russian economy and oil prices, none of that bothers him at all. There will be money for the front, there will be money for the army, there will be money for recruiting soldiers, and those very soldiers will be found. What they've been finding for 3-4 years already, they'll keep finding more. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything is going just fine. And as for what might collapse someday, that people will live badly, that there won't be any gasoline or something else, he doesn't care. They'll find gasoline for the tanks and everyone else will just have to walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone, not just Ukrainians. He doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative turn across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't even worth paying attention to. On the contrary, not a single word from any official representatives. And most likely in Moscow, they will pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, they don't have any kind of response yet. Medvedev is playing the role of the bad cop and is being rude to Trump. But, as we've already seen, over the past year, Putin and Trump haven't been rude to each other. They are being polite, just teasing each other a little. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements or insult Trump and say that we're now enemies. He'll probably just say something like, well, he got a bit carried away, we'll talk, we'll work things out. I don't think we're in for anything like him coming out crying and saying, well, that's it, it's over for me. I renounce power. I lost the war. The new sanctions have crushed me.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to roll everything back, and will Trump fall for empty promises and stalling tactics? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike the meeting in Anchorage, the US president realized much faster that the desired showdown wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. India and China, according to the media, will be forced to give up Russian black gold.
What are Central Asian countries planning behind the Kremlin's back? While Putin tries to hold on to his fading influence, his former brother the empire is switching sides fast. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are now signing deals with China, the EU and even the US, building a new political order without Moscow. Why did Central Asia betray Russia, and who's really behind this new alliance with China? Find out coming up next.
A visit of last hope. That's exactly how global media have dubbed Putin's trip to Tajikistan. After all, former allies, or more accurately, former vassals, are simply turning their backs on Russia.
In fact, Russia doesn't really have any significant tools to put serious pressure on its Central Asian partners, who are supposedly its allies in the CSTO, the Customs Union, the SCO, and elsewhere. But there doesn't seem to be much willingness to cooperate on their part.
In fact, Bloomberg analysts report that the Kremlin's longtime allies in Central Asia and the Caucasus are building ties with China, the European Union, Turkey, and the Persian Gulf countries, seeking to protect themselves from further aggression by Moscow. The reason for all this is the attack on Ukraine, because Putin has essentially declared that he is ready to use force to reclaim any territory that was once under Soviet influence. But such conclusions by Western media are far from unfounded. Among the former allies, Azerbaijan is now clearly leading the way in terms of its behavior toward Moscow, refusing to attend Putin's parade, seeking other security guarantors, and most importantly, searching for new international trade markets. All of this reflects Baku's current position. Even Putin's admissions on the eve didn't help. He admitted, for example, that it was indeed his air defense that shot down an Azerbaijani plane over Chechnya at the end of last year. It seems that even such statements can no longer save the relationship.
For the most part, for the first time in the history of the post-Soviet space, we are seeing a country that is quite close to Moscow, a country that is fairly loyal and has a similar political regime, one that did not take a different path like Ukraine or Georgia under Saakashvili, acting in a way that is not typical or as was previously customary. It publicly and openly criticizes Russia, and not only criticizes, but also actively backs up its criticism with reciprocal and proportionate actions, similar to how Russia itself acts towards citizens of other sovereign countries.
And the desire to live independently is being voiced more and more openly from a country in Central Asia. For example, just a few days ago, speaking at the UN, the leader of Kyrgyzstan stated that the country will now build its international relations without looking back at Moscow. I can
confidently say that today the process of forming a new Central Asia has begun thanks to its unity, stability, and growing regional identity. It is taking an increasingly strong position in the system of international relations as an independent entity.
The United States is also adding fuel to the fire in Russian-Asian relations. For instance, Donald Trump announced his readiness to pull yet another territory, Uzbekistan, out of Russia's sphere of influence. The head of the White House announced agreements reached between major American business representatives and the authorities of Uzbekistan. Companies will invest $1 billion in geological exploration and the development of critical mineral deposits in Uzbekistan. Trump also announced a major deal between Uzbekistan Airways and the American corporation Boeing. The agreement, which involves the delivery of 22 aircraft, is valued at $8 billion.
There are many areas in which Uzbekistan and the United States of America can expand mutually beneficial cooperation. I assure you, I personally guarantee the success of American companies operating in Uzbekistan. We will create all the necessary conditions so that American businesses feel confident and can fully take advantage of the opportunities in our market.
A sensational piece of news was published yesterday by Reuters journalists. Turkey will be able to meet its own gas needs and is therefore reducing imports from Russia and Iran. As a result, Russia is losing its largest client, one of the last in Europe. At the same time, Ankara plans to ensure its own supply by increasing production and boosting imports from the United States.
Of course, as always, Turkey will use its Eastern diplomacy to play both sides, either appealing to emotions or seeking benefits, bit by bit.
Eating the elephant piece by piece, just like China. For example, China has stopped supplying Russia with high-precision equipment, which Russian manufacturers are now openly stating. In particular, the owner of the company Tatpromstan, Ildar Nureyev. The head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, Oleksiy Kovalenko, said that active negotiations are currently underway between Beijing and Washington on strategic rapprochement, which could ultimately have catastrophic consequences for Russia.
China, a major global power, is in no immediate hurry to supply those very same crucial dual-use products and essential technologies to Russia, a nation that very much desires and desperately needs these items for its ongoing efforts and economic stability. These are essential semiconductors, critical components, specialized machine building equipment, and large sophisticated machines specifically used for the construction of self-propelled artillery. These are specialized industrial machines primarily used for the comprehensive production of ammunition, essential components for gunpowder and various explosives, and a range of other manufactured goods, including robust protective plates for body armor designed for military personnel. So,
China, acting in its own interests, is already putting obstacles in Putin's way when it comes to Russia's attempts to form gas alliances with Central Asia. Since the beginning of this year, Gazprom's attempts to build domestic gas networks in these countries have been failing in a rather surprising way. And analysts explain this is not without Beijing's involvement.
China has shown its lack of interest, made it clear, and somehow all these projects suddenly started to stall, and they are now facing certain contradictions, both economic and some technological and logistical reasons as well. Sometimes the roads aren't being built properly, and sometimes the standards aren't being met, or something else goes wrong. Then the political will in the Central Asian countries has shifted a bit. They've started saying that they can supply oil and gas to China on their own without intermediaries or help from Russia. And they don't need Russian volumes to secure their own shares in the Chinese gas market.
At the same time, to the average person, it might seem like there's no break in relations at all. The leaders of Central Asian countries regularly meet with Putin, and if you listen to Russian propaganda, it sounds like cooperation is only growing stronger. According to analysts, the main reason for this behavior remains the issue of migrants.
This is a very serious factor that forces Central Asia to take Russia into account and to be more conciliatory, even in the current situation. The fact is that millions of labor migrants work in Russia. This significantly eases social tensions in the region. Because if this generation, millions of people were to return, for example, Uzbekistan has 2 million, Kyrgyzstan 1 million, and so on, if they were to come back to their countries, those countries would not be able to provide them with decent jobs and wages. As a result, social discontent could arise in those countries.
However, as soon as new ties with the West strengthen and gain momentum, the migrants themselves will begin to return home. After all, the nature of deals with Western partners is not about kickbacks and percentages, but about legitimate enrichment at the state level, not just for individual officials. And the choice of whether to live in a sanctioned Russia or in their own country with prospects will no longer be an issue.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you believe the truth must be louder than propaganda, like, comment and subscribe. Your support keeps us on the front line of information, exposing the Kremlin lies and defending Ukrainians' worth in the world. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.